after Castro as the revolutionary leader stands down. Will it mean reform or even a new revolution? Cuba's legendary leader Fidel Castro is stepping down after nearly half a century as president. He hasn't been well since a stomach operation 18 months ago and is now 81. The communist revolution has kept his country locked in the last century and locked in confrontation with its neighbour, the United States. So will that relationship now change? Our senior correspondent James Mates reports.
El siguiente mensaje del comandante en jefe.
A simple announcement on Cuban television, a headline in the state-run newspaper, and a leader that no fewer than 9 US presidents have wanted to see the back of stands down of his own volition and on his own schedule. For 49 years, surrendering neither the revolutionary rhetoric nor the combat fatigues, Castro came to define his people and their seemingly eternal struggle with their giant neighbour, the United States.
Castro buys the loyalty of the peasants.
It was he who toppled the pro-American Batista regime, who repelled the US-backed counter-revolution at the Bay of Pigs, and then allowed his Soviet ally to park nuclear missiles right under the noses of his tormentors in Washington.
Regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Neither invasion nor CIA plots could remove him. In the end, he succumbed simply to the ravages of time. 18 months ago, emergency stomach surgery left him gravely weakened. His brother and fellow revolutionary Raúl, even then, took over effective control. In Washington's eyes, Raúl promises to be little different from Fidel.
So I view this as a period of transition that, and it should be the beginning of the democratic transition for the people in Cuba.
But in the view of Washington's old Cuba hands, democracy there is not imminent.
Change in the one-party system? I think hard to imagine, because you have to bring the military along. The armed forces are the backbone of the revolution. They're efficient, they're capable, so it depends on how far they're going to let this go.
Cuban exiles in Miami today celebrated the departure of the man they've both feared and despised for so long. But the replacement of Fidel by Raúl will change very little for these people. And in the short term at least, the younger brother's assumption of the presidency will do little to change US policy. There's an election on in America, and where bogeymen are concerned, one Castro will be as good as another. James Mates, News at 10 in the United States.
Well, there's hope on the streets of Havana that Fidel Castro's retirement will mean more freedom and a better standard of living. For tonight's News at 10 special assignment, our correspondent Robert Moore discovered many have tired of revolution but do still want reform in the Cuba after Castro.
To visit Cuba before Fidel Castro finally definitively stepped off the stage was to see a nation that has stagnated for half a century, an island caught in a bizarre time warp. It appears almost as two countries, one for the tourists with its luxury hotels and smiling musicians, another for ordinary Cubans, enduring economic isolation and a suffocating lack of freedom. This is a trip unauthorized by the Cuban government to try and discover what ordinary Cubans are thinking at this extraordinary moment, and for that we have to be careful for ourselves and especially for those we interview. But talking openly involves great personal risk. Posing as tourists to avoid Castro's agents, we arranged a secret rendezvous in the back streets of Havana, where courageous Cubans were prepared to talk, so long as their identity was protected.
I cannot say the truth in front of the camera.
And your big hope now is for freedom?
Freedom. I only say that, freedom. That's more important than many things.
Then his mother spoke out as well. 2 generations with one view of Cuba. Is it a mistake in the West for many people to have romanticized Fidel and Che Guevara and what's happened here in Cuba over recent years?
The
revolution started badly, she says, and it's ending badly. It wasn't a revolution, it was a coup d'etat. And then she adds, my hope is also for freedom. This country under Castro is a prison, an island prison, floating on the sea.
¿Me entiendes? Yo digo que somos un país de prisión flotante.
Outside of Havana, the mood can be difficult to gauge. On one level, much seems impressive about Cuba. Indeed, the rural health care and the schools are excellent. But beyond that, behind these eager young faces, is a deep frustration, a sense of lost opportunities. What awaits this new generation, now the iconic leader has stepped aside? And everywhere I turned, I found grievances. The tobacco growers have no incentives. This farmer, for example, works for the state, earning just a pittance. And the taxi drivers talk of an underworld of corruption. The empty roads testament to how only a few Cubans are allowed to drive cars. Even the country's musicians must hand over all their earnings to the government. In return, they get a tiny state salary. Since 1958, Cuba has been ruled by one man, who decided this island should become the front line in Cold War politics, a communist experiment on America's doorstep. It's up here in these central mountains that Castro's extraordinary revolution began. But now, with the iconic leader gone, what happens to Cuba next? Does it just stagnate? Or is there reform? Or even a counter-revolution? From our tour here, it seems clear that what many Cubans hope for is that middle course, reform. Wanting a better, freer life, without the chaos of another revolution. Robert Moore, News at 10, Cuba.
Still to come on our programme tonight.
From darlings to starlings, the new reason to go to Gretna Green.
It was just awesome. It was absolutely fantastic. It's like a dance in the sky.
More of those amazing pictures and more of tonight's news.
And finally, Gretna Green has recently become a magnet for a new group of visitors, starlings, thousands upon thousands of them. Almost every evening now, they've been massing to put on a graceful and stirring display of airborne art. Our correspondent Emma Murphy went to Gretna to marvel at these moving masterpieces in the sky.
It is surely one of nature's most magnificent shows. Swarming like bees, 500,000 starlings grace the Scottish sky. They've come from the harsh winters of Russia and Scandinavia to roost with the domestic starling population. And as night falls, they put on a majestic performance. Quite something for a bird that most of us take for granted in the back garden. This is the most incredible spectacle. Hundreds of thousands of starlings being joined by more every second. They fly together, then they separate, they sweep up and then drop down. It's amazing to see, and I'm just not sure that TV can actually do this justice. You really need to see it with your own eyes. It's like watching ribbon caught on a breeze. Tumbling and banking, the birds fly in perfect unison. Incredibly, they never collide.
Each starling keys in on what the birds around it are actually doing, and the end result is a sort of almost like flowing liquid, you know, as the birds are flying around in these huge numbers before they all pile down into the roost site for the night. Such scenes have brought birdwatchers from around the country to Gretna to catch a sight of the half-hour display.
Words can't describe that. It's so spectacular, it's untrue.
It was just awesome. It was absolutely fantastic. It's like a dance in the sky, and it's just been one of my ambitions to see that. So it's just been a fantastic evening and quite unbelievable the patterns and what they do. And then the show is over. 500,000 birds descending into the trees, all eager for a place to roost. Emma Murphy, News at 10, Gretna.
And our show is over too tonight.